Hey guys, I'm Inder. I'm the founder and CEO of Kinsa. I'm really happy to be here. Before I start, I just want to get a sense for the audience. How many of you are makers, people who are creating products? 40%. How many of you work on the business side of your work, the equation? A lot? Oh, more? Wow. Okay. Anyone here from a retailer? Anyone? Good, I won't offend anyone tonight then. Good. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kinsa, and then I'm going to talk about how you introduce products into retail and the trials and tribulations that we've gone through with respect to that. And I'll hopefully give you some hacks about how to do it, so if you guys are trying to introduce products. First, I'll introduce Kinsa. And to introduce Kinsa, I'll just pose a question. I will also preface this by saying we're a little bit of an unusual consumer electronics company because we work in healthcare, and so I'll talk about it from that angle. So imagine what we could do as a society if we could track the spread of illness in real time. For those of you that are scratching your head saying, can't we do that already with all the mobile hardware, software, and sensors we have in the world, the answer is no, we're not even close. And it's one reason why things are affecting our country the way they are today. Enterovirus is going around. There are concerns about Ebola, and of course seasonal flu is about to hit us pretty hard. We started Kinsa with that mission in mind, to create the world's first real-time map of human health to track and stop the spread of illness. And to do that, we reimagined the world's most common medical product, the first product anyone uses to confirm an illness. We use this product to gather data on the spread of illness. This is what I like to describe as the world's smartest thermometer. I'll show you a picture of it, and I'll tell you more. There we go. So I'm going to give you a little demonstration and just talk through how our software and hardware works. This particular version of the thermometer connects via your headphone jack, and it is actually the least expensive electronic thermometer ever created. So imagine that your child, your 5-year-old, isn't feeling well, so you get the Kinsa smart thermometer out to take her temperature. Hopefully the video will start playing. No luck? Oh. No, the last one. There we go, hit this, there we go. Oh. Now hopefully we can get that off there. So we've created a fun, engaging screen.
Reading complete.
Maybe the escape button? I don't know, to get it off the, there we go. Let's try that. All right, let's get back to the slide. So we created a fun, engaging screen for both parent and for child. The bubbles that you're seeing start from the connection point to the thermometer. They've got gravitational effects. There's a game that kids can play. If the thermometer slips out of your place, a big frowny face appears.
Incomplete.
It's supposed to say reading complete. With a few simple taps, you can then track your symptoms over time, associate that with any member of your family, and now you have a full illness history. So you have a child that has a relatively normal temperature, but is starting to exhibit symptoms. You want to check the health of her friends to see what's going around and what she may have. So here you see the private group that you joined with other parents of your child's first grade class. You see that 4 out of 24 kids are ill, and it looks like strep throat's going around. That causes you concern, so you look for the nearest urgent care facility with an appointment. So this is the kind of triage functionality we can provide. Even if you haven't joined a private group, you can still see the local health situation. This isn't part of the product today, but this is what we're creating, a localized understanding of what symptoms and illnesses are going around in real time. And that's not only useful for the individual, it's obviously useful for the healthcare system. So that's the product. We are selling it for 50% off for all attendees tonight. If you guys want to buy one, it's over there. And we just launched about 4 months ago. It currently sells for $29.99 in CVS, on Apple stores, on Amazon, and on our website. And I'll talk a little bit about our trials and tribulations in getting into retail. So just to give you a little bit of a sense for the broader mission behind Kinsa, this is really our vision. It's a world of instantaneous communication and instantaneous sensing through these kinds of connected products. And I have some really strong feelings about the Internet of Things and connected products, which I'd be happy to discuss with you afterwards. But I will just make one slightly contentious statement, which is I'm a big believer that these kinds of hardware will become highly commoditized within a few years. The value is really in the software. And so trying to make these connected products as low cost possible is really important. So I echo Ben's statement that when you're starting to connect products through hardware, you should be thinking about cost, and you should be thinking about reducing the number of buttons, using the smartphone or another mobile device for display, power, processing, connectivity, all those things that you can use the smartphone or other mobile devices for. So let's talk a little bit about entering into retail. So you've got a great product. Now you want to sell it and get into the masses. Where, when, how? Do I work with retailers? Do I go just online? And what challenges should I expect? These are questions you ought to be asking yourself if you're not. How many of you guys loathe the idea of selling your product in bricks and mortar retailers? Oh, it's so primitive. Okay, most people want to sell in bricks and mortar retailers. Well, let me scare you a bit. So first, the scary part. 90% of product launches in retail fail. This is perhaps a lower percentage than the venture capital industry has in success rates. Number two is the retailers take a lot of the money. They take 35 to 50 points. And remember, you have a cost of goods. You have to figure out how to get the product in the country, so that's eating into your margins too. Well, let me scare you a little bit more. US retail is very hard. There's lots of hidden costs. There's lots of hidden effort required. So if you haven't heard of these terms and you're thinking about introducing your product, you should spend some time online. So not only do retailers take a cut, distributors take a cut. Then brokers potentially take a cut. You need some sort of relationship manager to manage the retail, and you pay someone a percentage of your take to manage your retailer. There's also these strange things called market development funds, which is another cut at your take home, which is the retailers charge you to market their products in their stores. So the 35 to, we'll talk about it, it's 35 to 50% is what they take to put you on the shelf. Doesn't include the marketing costs. And oh, by the way, if you make an error shipping, retailers charge you. For those of you that don't know, the inbound shipping units of most retailers are profit centers, not cost centers. They make more money because they charge people for errors in shipping. Let's talk about the other kinds of issues. I'll hit a couple of these points. Very limited data on sales. Right? In the web world, we love having data. We love seeing the funnel and where we're losing people. You're not going to get great data from many retailers. Some retailers are good, and it's certainly not in real time. Delays, the data is not aggregated well, et cetera, and you have to pay them to get the data in the first place. So another point where you're paying them again. I'll just tell you a little bit of a horror story. We worked with one retailer where I had to get out my old Windows computer from 2 years ago and get an old version of Internet Explorer in order to use their EDI system, because literally I couldn't use my Mac. So technology is primitive in many of these retailers, and that's really unfortunate. You can see the other points here. For those of you that don't have a business background, let's just talk about why this is the concept of working capital, right? So you, as a company, are shelling out money, right? You're shelling out money because you need to get materials for manufacturing. You're shelling out money because you need to manufacture the product, taking those materials and turning it into an end product. You need to package it. You're shelling out money because you need to warehouse that either overseas or here in the US, and then you need to ship it to the actual retailer. Well, finally, at some point in the future, you will get paid. But the point is you're shelling out lots and lots of money. So one of the big problems with the hardware business is that you can get caught up in starting to get lots of inventory and make mistakes, or have problems with your product where you need to do recalls. So growing too fast is always a question mark in the retail industry. But the other point here I just want to make is startups typically do not get paid upon receipt at a retailer. They get paid when the end customer buys the product in the retailer. If you're a really good negotiator, and we happen to have some really good negotiators, you can overcome this challenge. But typically, startups don't get paid until the end consumer buys the product at the store. So it's a long time. So why sell in retail? By the way, you guys can feel free to comment or ask questions during this. Don't wait. So why sell in retail? And I'm going to pose that question to you guys. Now that I've given you the horror story, why do you want to sell in retail? Does anyone have a thought about this? Why?
Get yourself out there.
You get yourself out there, right? You get the product out there. Why else? So you drive volumes, but I'd actually argue that there's a second reason. So not only are you going to distribute lots of products, but if you really want to be a well-known brand, you have to be where people are looking for you. For us, as a thermometer, we have to be in the drugstore. We want to be in Apple stores, right? But we have to be in those places where you're looking. And to build a really beautiful brand that's well-known, you still have to be in bricks and mortar retailers. There's some exceptions in product categories, of course, but that I would argue is one of the rules of thumb there.
Would you distribute to, let's say, a hospital or have a hospital version?
So we have a multi-channel strategy ourselves, but again, each channel and each retailer within that channel is a separate animal in and of itself, right? CVS is different from Walgreens slightly, which is different from Toys R Us, if we wanted to, or Babies R Us in our case, which is different from Brookstone, which is different from Apple. So it just takes a lot of manpower and overhead and time to manage that. So selecting where you sell is really, really important, which is a perfect lead-in to where do I sell my product? Here's the thing that you want to be asking yourselves if you're a producer of hardware, right? Where do people, or will people, naturally look for my product? You need to be in those channels. And for us, it's the drugstore. Because we're a connected product, it also happens to be online and in Apple stores, we believe. We're still testing that hypothesis. And I also want to say this, for those of you that are makers in the audience, you need to think about this now when you're making a product. Because where you sell will impact your product requirements, and it will impact your plan for your company, how many people you need and where you need it. And I'll provide a couple simple examples with our end products. So this is our e-commerce packaging. Really small, sleek, just a case, and it's a reusable case. Really simple. We're not going to get away with that in the drugstore. And we're certainly not going to get away with that in Apple. So here's the really high-end Apple-esque packaging with this kind of window sort of open in the front. It's really high-end looking, and Apple wants that kind of feel and look and feel. They sort of demand the higher-end packaging. But that's not good. That's not the right orientation for CVS, who wants much more of a product that sells relative to other thermometers. So the messaging is very, very different. And the retailers will sometimes accept your packaging and sometimes say, well, you need to change it. Especially if you're a startup and they don't think you really know what you're doing just yet, they'll definitely force you to do those kinds of things. So really think about it, because there are things like security tags and child safety laws and specific kinds of packaging requirements that are different by channel and affects your cost of goods. It also affects your production line. So think about these kinds of things up front. Where you sell will impact your product requirements and your company infrastructure. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of retailers just to give you a broad sense of the differences in case you guys are thinking about these channels. Margins vary highly by channel. I'm giving you sort of Amazon versus Apple versus a typical retailer. Interestingly enough, the frequency of when new products are added varies highly by channel. So at drugstores, you can only introduce your product, at least for our category, one time per year. If you miss that window, you're out of luck. Wait one more year. And if you miss getting the product to their distribution centers, even if you sign a contract, you're still SOL. Okay, wait till one more year. So that's the kind of thing that you need to plan for well in advance. It's a year-long lead time in some cases. And there's a lot of these other costs that come into play. For example, in Apple, they require you to use a distributor, which takes again 5 to 10% cut depending on your product type. We talked about some of the other costs for the other retail channels. So here's some hacks for you guys, for those of you guys that want to introduce your product in retail. And these are hacks that I haven't necessarily used. So a major wearable company that you probably know of uses this first hack. They say go international right off the bat. Go off the bat and demand prepayment. They've done it very, very successfully. And the CEO of a very notable company talks about this quite a bit. It's true. If you go international, distributors will pay you up front, at least for a period of time, and they will cover your marketing, which is really, really cool. In the US, that doesn't happen. Second, go to Apple first. If you're struggling to get into other retailers saying, I sell in Apple stores, it will get you in the door at those retailers. They love that. Apple doesn't really compete with anyone. They're loved by most other retailers because it's brand validity, it's design validity. There's a couple other tips up here, but I'll just cut down to the rule of thumb. As you guys are thinking about your cost of goods and your bill of materials and things like that, this is the rule of thumb that most people talk about. Your wholesale price to your retailer should be at least 4 times your cost of goods. If you have a new wave product that involves hardware and software, think about your customer support costs. So arguably in that case, it ought to be 6x your cost of goods. That's your wholesale price, not your price to your customer. That's your price that you sell the retailer at. That's the kind of rule of thumb here. Hardware products have a difficult time making really good margins compared to software products for these reasons. The last couple things I'll just say is start on packaging earlier. Everyone wants to see packaging up front. They won't sign the contract and give you the deal unless you have great packaging. You know, there's fundamentally a trade-off between getting the merchandising equation right, merchandising meaning packaging, and how you're going to pitch this and position this to the user. Getting it right and spending the time versus going big. Going big fast potentially has great rewards if you have a hit product, but it's also extremely risky. The VCs may want you to do this. If it was your own money and you're trying to be risk averse, a lot of the people who I've talked to who've introduced products say go very, very slow. Start with a few small scale stores, make sure you get the merchandising equation right, how you sell to the consumer in the store. And I will tell you that if you have a novel product, selling into retail is easy. We've never had more than 2 meetings before any retailers accepted national distribution because it's a novel product. For traditional products, it's very hard. You spend a lot of time trying to sell in. What's hard with novel products is selling through to the end customer because you don't necessarily know that the end customer is going to really understand the value proposition of a smartphone connected thermometer. So anyway, the last, again, just to sort of reiterate the point I just made, merchandising is a highly, highly imperfect science. You cannot iterate on it quickly. It costs a lot of money to do this. So it's unlike software in that way. Really think about these kinds of equation, the kind of merchandising equation up front. That's all I have to say. Thanks, guys.
Very terrific. Thank you. Questions? That's all right.
You said drugstores take product once a year. When is that?
You actually want, the first question that you want to ask any retailer is when's your next reset for this product category? When's your next planogram reset? There's a couple different terms out there. It depends on the category. So for the thermometer aisle, it was for one drugstore it's June, another drugstore it's July, but it varies by drugstore. So it really depends on the category and the retailer on the number and timing of a quote-unquote reset. And then you have to work backwards from there. You've got to sell to them 4.5 months in advance. You've got to get, 6 months in advance. You've got to get them product at their distribution centers 2 to 3 months in advance. So it really is a 9-month planning process because you've got to get your sales materials ready and you've got to spend the money and figure out how to build the relationships with the right retailers to even get into them and see them. So does that make sense?
You mentioned Brookstone. Are they still really in business? I thought they had a good buyer and such. And so there's 2 parts. It's what happens when stores close that your merchandise is on their shelves, and what about when they really close or reorganize like Brookstone?
So I don't know the answer to that entirely. I will tell you that most US retailers that are majors have full right of return, which means, and it's very difficult for a 1 product, 2 product, 3 product company to get anything less than than that term. But that means they can return the product to you at your cost, and they probably charge you a penalty when they return it to you. Now, if they go out of the business, I have no idea how that works, but I'd have to go read my contracts. But again, they stuff you. They charge you for everything. So.
Hi, Inder. So, I am an investor. I've invested in a company that has been lucky to get into retail. I agree with you that the challenge wasn't in convincing a motivated entrepreneurial buyer to try a new product, rather to educate them, to educate the consumer, right? So their retailers are not in the business of educating consumers. They want to move volume. So any lessons on, did you create some incentive or training or something that, motivated the retailer to educate? Or was the education done by you direct to consumer?
I'll come back in a year and tell you because we just launched 5 months ago. So we're still experimenting with this and trying to draw on our advisors to do this. We spend a lot of time trying to learn what sells. For us, seeing the product in action or giving it to a user and letting them use it works. They want the product when they use it or they see it in action. That means broadcast for us. That means TV, video. That means handing it out in terms of samples. We know that that works. And so our marketing strategy in our first year and during this flu season is very much aligned with that. Let's get the product out to schools and parents. Let's give it away to seed the market. Let's give discounts to schools who want to run campaigns. Let's get video broadcasts. Let's create beautiful videos. So again, that's from learning about our product. I don't know if it's going to work. I'll tell you in a year. So there's a question over here, I think.
So yeah, just wondering about using CNBC or other media outlets. It would seem you could probably get around the retailers if you're doing it online.
The cost of running ads is high. If you can create a PR buzz around your product, that's incredible. We're trying to do that. We're starting to try and do that. We were on the Today Show last week, which was super cool. We appeared in an Apple television commercial in July, which was amazing, even though it was a 1-second blip. It was still pretty amazing. So we're really excited about that, but that's luck and relationships and a really strong PR engine. So, yeah.
One last question.
Yeah, at what point does e-commerce make more sense than retail, and what are some pros and cons of each of them?
My answer to that is always start in e-commerce. Like, get on Amazon ASAP. To be clear, e-commerce is Amazon. There's nothing else. It's Amazon. There is literally nothing else. You need to be on Amazon ASAP, and your own website, of course, right? Because that's where people will come search for you. But these, like CVS.com, Walgreens.com, et cetera, if you actually look at the volume they drive, for any retailer, their online store, it's not very high. It's like equivalent of maybe 5 or 10 stores of theirs, which is good for some retailers, but it's not like the 5,000 stores that CVS has. So 7,000, excuse me. So it really is Amazon. So I would just say start there definitely, like as soon as possible, and then use that to your advantage to get into retail when your strategy, when it suits you for your company strategy.
All right, awesome. That's all the time we have. But terrific job. Thank you very much.